coming up on Garden Talk.
If I feel like I'm off on the schedule or the plant is showing signs of like under food or too much food, then it gives me an immediate idea of like how much I need to either dial back the Floraflex or give them a little more.
Any kind of training method that's out there, I've probably tried it with an auto, and I don't see any significant difference.
But honestly, after like a year of doing that and just seeing what was coming out of Heaven's tent running 18.6 and then seeing what was coming out of my tent in 24, I felt like there was no real difference.
If you are planning on transplanting them, it's on a timeline. You have to keep that in mind. All these like theories, I guess, against autos, when they're like, don't top, don't do this or don't do that, all it comes down to is two things: your timeline and your genetics.
What's up, everybody? If you that don't know me, my name is Chris, aka Mr. Growit, and you're tuned into the Garden Talk podcast. This is episode number 54. In this episode, I interview Highigan. Many of you know them from their YouTube channel, Highigan, which has nearly 20,000 subscribers. They're both very big into growing autoflowers, and that's what we're going to get into today. Thanks to all of you who support this podcast or Patreon. If you'd like to support, you can do so by going to patreon.com/MrGrowit. Before we get into it, I want to acknowledge that one of my goals for this podcast is to bring zero costs for information about gardening, all plants, to the general public. That being said, I'd like to thank the sponsors of today's episode who helped make that goal possible. Thanks to Spider Farmer for sponsoring this episode. Spider Farmer has recently redesigned their SF series LED grow lights. In the old version, the Samsung diodes are close together, resulting in the light being more focused towards the center of the coverage area. In the new version, the Samsung diodes are spaced out, resulting in a better light spread across the coverage area. I will leave a link to a Spider Farmer website and their Amazon store down in the description section below, and you can use discount code MrGrowit5 during checkout for a discount on their products. Thanks to Dutch Pro for sponsoring this podcast. Dutch Pro products are now available in several countries across the world. For those of you that don't know, Dutch Pro is a plant fertilizer company that has base nutrients, additives, and pH regulators. They have different formulas of base nutrients for if you're in soil or if you're in hydro or cocoa. They also formulate their base nutrients for if you're using hard water or if you're using RO or soft water. I will leave a link to Dutch Pro's Amazon store down in the description section below, and you can use coupon code MrGrowit10DP for a discount on their products. AC Infinity is a sponsor of the podcast. Coupon code MrGrowit will get you a discount on their products. I've been using their Cloudline T6 and T4 inline fans for several years now, and I absolutely love the automation built into them. On the inline fans controller, you can have set points for high and low temperature, as well as high and low humidity. This greatly helps control my indoor garden environment, so the temperature and humidity stays in the ideal ranges. I will leave a link to AC Infinity down in the description section below, and don't forget to use coupon code MrGrowit for a discount on their products. And we're back. Welcome to the Garden Talk podcast. Today I am joined with Highigan. How you doing today?
Hey, hi again.
Hi again.
We back.
Glad to have you on board. So this is new for me. Usually I'm only interviewing one person at a time. This time I've got to interview two people at a time. So something a little bit different for this podcast, but I figured why not? You know, you guys come as a team there, as a group.
Yeah, we are a package deal.
Yeah,
There we go, package deal.
we are. That's pretty much the beginning. We've been just learn to grow.
Yeah. We bounce off each other, so it's hard not to,
Yeah. It's just not the same. When one person is gone, you don't get the dynamic.
Yeah.
That is.
That's what I figured. So yeah, let's talk about some autoflowers. We'll talk all about autoflowers today. I want to get deep into it and really find out what you guys do in the garden. But first, let's do an introduction. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got into gardening?
I guess that starts with me because I was telling you before, I've been observing, the growth of plants in my whole life, even though it wasn't legal, and it's always been something that I've been interested in, and even just growing plants in general has always been pretty interesting for me. So when it became legal here in Michigan, it was almost a no-brainer for me to just to try it myself, because obviously I'm a user of the plant, and it's just something that I just knew that I was going to be interested in, and so I started growing my myself, and that's, and like really right in the beginning is right when I met Neil, so he just kind of jumped on it along with me.
Yeah, and when I met her is when she was growing, and I, of course, when it came up in Michigan to vote for it, like, heck yeah, I voted for it, and it passed and everything, and it kind of fell by the wayside. Like, I wasn't like gung-ho about growing, but I was like, I voted for it because I was like, heck yeah, it should be legal, and heck yeah, I maybe I want to grow it someday. But then after I saw her growing, it kind of like got me excited about it, and then I had ordered her some seeds for her birthday, some sour diesel autos, and then that was like our introduction to auto, because I didn't know there was a difference when I ordered them. I'm just like,
Yeah,
auto sounds impressive.
Yeah, I didn't even know I had no idea that it was even there was even a difference in plants when he ordered them. We had no idea.
Yeah,
So
we just kind of fell in love with the autos, and then that, we started growing those and started the YouTube, and that's kind of what got us into, I guess, where we are now.
We just thought, hey, as beginners, we wanted to show really that if we can do it, anybody can do it. Like, and we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
When we started, we had no clue. So it's almost like we want to just show people that if they want to, they can do it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of just snowballed.
That's awesome. Yeah, it does take some learning, right? Some patience in order to do it, but definitely anybody can learn how to do it, I think.
Yeah.
So that's really cool how both of you kind of came together like that. So you guys are in the same garden, right? What's your style of gardening? Are you indoor, outdoor? Are you soil, cocoa, hydro, organic, synthetic?
About to open the can of worms here. Tell them,
Well, we started organic, and that was actually at my house. We actually don't live together.
Yeah.
So in the state of Michigan, we can have 12 plants per household. So we actually have 2 different grows.
Yeah, so we can afford the luxury of basically, we see each other as much as we can. We live like an hour away from each other, so it makes it hard to make the content and stuff like that, but we're doing the best we can. But basically, like, Heaven has her own grow, which is the 5x5, and then I have like the 4x4. So we're not necessarily growing the same stuff or styles. We've been like going crazy, trying all these different things that we can, and just having fun with it. So we do have like our own grow that we're both like involved with, but not directly, I guess. Because it's not like
I'm growing more organic, and actually lately, and Neil's actually ending one of his first runs with synthetic.
Yeah, we were both doing organics.
So I actually started with organics. I've been using Nature's Living Soil. I've actually tried dry amendments, and I really love that. And actually, I get to learn the plant and what it's telling me, I feel like, and I get to learn it at an accelerated rate with autos.
Yeah.
Because every plant's different. Every plant's showing me in a different way, and I have to learn, okay, this is what that means with this kind of phenotype. So I feel like I'm learning at almost an accelerated rate with autos. But, I mean, I'm growing organic, so you are actually, you tell them about how you're growing.
I started too doing the organics. We were kind of doing the same thing, like dry amendments and like what we saw, like watching Mr. Canucks and like all the videos we've seen online. But then I tried that for basically the last year, and then switched over recently to try cocoa and like Floraflex and synthetic newts. And it's like completely different, like I'm not it's a whole different thing, but I almost kind of like it in a way. So, it just gives us the flexibility to try different things with our grows. And, we're always just bouncing ideas off each other.
And we're actually doing something on our channel right now. We're actually documenting right now. We're trying the same strain in one organic, one synthetic. So hopefully everybody can follow along.
That'll be a fun one.
Yeah, it's a really fun one. You guys can follow along with.
So for autos in particular, container size is a big thing, right? So some people will start in a small container, small solo cup, and then they'll transplant up into different size containers. Some people are adamant that you should be starting in your final container, right? So they'll start in like a 3 or a 5 gallon grow pot, and then they'll keep that plant in that container for the entire life. What container size are you typically in, and do you do transplanting like that, or what?
I think you should start this one, man.
Yeah. Well, I actually am for the transplant, and I actually have a couple reasons why I do that. Um, but I don't think I'm really just totally one side or the other. I just feel like the transplant is just easier for my lifestyle. Um, honestly, I don't feel like putting it in the final pot or transplanting it is doing too much of harm. But I do think that there is that fine line. There's a time. There's definitely a time where it gets past where it's an auto, so it's on a timeline. You have to think about that throughout seed to the end, no matter what. Anyway, so for me, I do the transplant, but I do that because sometimes seeds don't make it, and I don't want a whole pot that I made up, and I have a perpetual grow, so it's almost like that pot will just sit around if it doesn't have something in it. So for me, it's easier to just wait that 9 to 11 days before I transplant them to make sure. But for Neil, I think you do it differently.
Yeah, so Heaven's pretty much always done starting solo cups and then transplant into final pot. I've pretty much always gone, like, I'll germinate them and I just do the paper towel method, like ghetto style, but it works good. So, we're sticking with that. So I just wait till it's got a pretty good taproot on it and then put it in the final pot. And that's the way I've pretty much always done ours. But we've seen so many comments about, like, oh, you can't transplant or don't start in a small thing with autos. Like, honestly, over the year or so that we've been doing the channel and it grows, like Heaven's autos that she's always done solo cup to final pot are, huge. Huge ones that turn out 5 feet tall and are just insane. And it's, she transplanted them and people are like, oh, you can't do, like, I feel like there's definitely some myths and things, but we try everything. Like, we don't care. We'll see what happens.
But again, as with autos, I just feel like it's on a timeline. Even the transplant is on a timeline.
Yeah, you definitely
Your
don't want to
feeding
do it
is on a
too late.
timeline. No matter what with autos, it's on a timeline. So if you are planning on transplanting them, it's on a timeline. You have to keep that in mind.
I agree. Yeah, you're definitely going to do it on time because if it does come root bound in that small container, it could lead to a stunted growth, which, like you said, it's on a timeline. You could
get
result
those little
in lower
baby
yield.
little one nugs.
Agree. Yep. So you do have. There's a time where if it's too late.
But there are benefits too. So I've done both. I've started in the final container, and then I've also done the solo cup and then transplant up. I haven't done it enough to really have a solid opinion on it. You know what I mean? But
I agree. Actually, I did try that one time. I did try that. We did the solo cup to a 1 gallon, to a 3 gallon, to a 5 gallon.
It was like a 3 transplant with the
and
auto.
the plant itself was very healthy. Actually, it just didn't get very big.
Yeah, it definitely stunted
but it never ran out of nutrients. Like it was always okay. It ended up being pretty flame actually.
Yeah, because I assume you're probably transplanting into soil that is amended with some sort of nutrition in it.
Yeah.
So, as you transplant up, you're basically feeding the plant in a sense, right? Because it's a new medium on that one. And then some people will swear by transplanting because they want the opportunity to have access to the root zone to sprinkle microbes on there, right? So mycorrhizal fungi is one of them that is an extension of the root zone. It's going to help with nutrient uptake, and that's best applied when it's directly onto the roots. So some people are like, yes, transplant, always transplant. They're hardcore transplanters because of that reason alone. So there are so many different ways to go about it. I was just wondering how you guys went about the autos, So.
Yeah, we love it. We say you gotta grow to know. So if you're curious, freaking try it.
I haven't tried all the methods there is out there to transplant, and honestly, I'd like to try more. So if people have techniques that I haven't heard of, you could totally throw them my way.
Absolutely. Yeah, always welcome, especially in the comment section of this video if you're tuning in on YouTube. Comment section, share some best practices. I love that. I love when people are able to share their experience on how they do things because others can read and learn and potentially implement in their gardens. So that's one thing I love about the community. Let's talk about plant training a little bit. So we'll start with topping autoflowers. That's another controversial thing, right?
Yeah,
you can't top autos. You can't top autos. Some people do it. Some people swear by it.
Possible.
What are you guys' stance on topping autos?
I feel like if the plant wants it.
Yeah.
It definitely depends completely, I feel like, on, again, the timing of it. and genetics.
Yeah.
I mean, in my opinion, when we've topped how many?
We topped a lot. We tried a bunch in grocers. We tried multi-tops, just single tops.
We did try.
Yeah, I feel like what we found for autos that seems to work the best is like if it's one that is overperforming or like getting tall really quickly. Like after a round it has like 5 nodes, we'll usually top it only once because we've tried like topping multiple times. It just always seems to cause more stress than anything. So it seems like early on, maybe day 25 to 30, and just if you're gonna top it, just a single time on the main one is what we seem to works the best. But we've definitely done both, and definitely some perform and turn out great. It gives you a really even canopy, and like we usually do trim off also the bottom nodes early.
Instead of topping, I feel like taking the bottom nodes off seems to do a lot better for the plant because the bottom nodes never end up being anything substantial anyway.
That's what we've noticed with auto. So we always that's the first thing we chop actually. Like the earliest, probably day 20, 23, we'll cut the very bottom 2 nodes because they never really end up growing out to be anything. So it's like get rid of them as soon as possible, give it a little time to recover, and if it is still beasting out, then we would usually do a top.
But again, with autos, it's on a timeline.
Yeah. I know some people who have, some of these genetics are just so vigorous, especially if you put them in the right media, like an airy medium with cocoa, and you get all that oxygen in the root zone. It's just real optimized, VPD, CO2, all that stuff, where they're running into height issues, right? You think of autos, you think of them being real small and stuff.
Yeah.
Some people want to top autos for height reasons and also to reshape the plant, right? Once you top that apical meristem, that main shoot, it's going to promote growth on those lower branches, so it'll help with kind of an even canopy and stuff like that. So there are benefits there. But the folks on the other side are saying, any sort of stunting growth on autos, anytime you top, is going to reduce your yield. So I think that's another controversial thing where you just got to do it and try it out for yourself, right? You got to...
I'm not necessarily... I feel like all these like theories, I guess, against autos, when they're like, don't top, don't transplant, don't do this or don't do that, all it comes down to is 2 things. Your timeline and your genetics. That's it. I mean, when you really that's what it is. So when people say don't do this or don't do that, I mean, where are you getting this information from? How do you know?
Yeah.
Because you didn't try this strain with that, you can't really say.
We've noticed that the auto genetics aren't definitely as solid as like photos. So the one that we're going to do stuff with is that one that's like performing like ridiculous and it's like shooting up super tall, like real fast. And it's like, well, we better do something about that. You can pretty much either only tie it over or you can top it. But usually if it's growing so vigorously that we think that way, if you top it, it's still going to do pretty good. Yeah. Like it's going to recover quickly and just keep growing like nothing happened.
I don't know if I prefer the topping method.
Yeah.
But
we don't every time. It just kind of plant dictates what we do.
Yeah.
Now, how about low stress training? That's something that's often done in order, again, to get an even canopy and help with even cola size across the plant and stuff like that. And it's very common with autoflowers. Do you do low stress training at all?
Oh yeah, heck yeah, we do. We do the tie-over method. I'm a big fan of the garden stakes because they're easily positionable and you can start to train it even if the arms aren't or the branches aren't to the edge of the pot like some of the tie-down ones. I don't know. It's just easier to move around. So we've been using the garden stakes mostly, and the basement autoflowers training bags. Those are bomb too. We've been using those. But we'll either usually tie it over or just like light branch stuff. Kind of some more tie overs lately as we try and like control the height and try and get a really even canopy without stressing it too hard. So that's usually tying it over at an earlier age or manipulating branches.
That's what I've been implementing recently in my grow is just the tie over, but I don't even know if it helps necessarily yield versus just letting it grow on its own. I don't necessarily think that. I think that the plant's going to give you what it's going to give you. That's just my opinion because we've tried low stress training. I've tried Christmas treeing it. I've tried topping. I've tried, any any kind of training method that's out there, I've probably tried it with an auto. And I don't see any significant difference. I would say, if anything, maybe low stress training, maybe tying it over would give me better light to my bud sites. But other than that, I see no real benefit behind like yield.
That's interesting you say that. I've kind of the opposite in a sense, where I've grew now. Of course, we're talking from seed, different phenotypes each seed, so everything's gonna grow differently. It's gonna depend on what generation they're on and stuff like that. But I had 10 autoflowers, all the same cultivar, and I did some of them I did low stress training on, some of them I just grew naturally Christmas tree style, and the ones I did low stress training on actually yielded more than the normally grown out ones that were grown Christmas tree style. So I'm personally a big fan of low stress training, but like you said, everybody's different. I think it does come down to genetics for sure. It's so hard to measure, especially since they're all different phenos. Like there's no cloning of autos. Like you can clone an auto, but it's not really that beneficial since it's on that timeline. Like you mentioned, you're not really going to get too much out of it as you would if you were to just plant a seed and grow that. So.
Yeah, I do think you definitely can see better results though because when you do tie it over and train it, all depend on genetics and how the whole grow goes. But if you can get even light penetration to the whole plant rather than the top down, because like we have the par meter, we've tested like the top of the plant versus your bottom nugs, hundreds of pars difference between that, So if you can get it as even as possible and then control your light, like of course you should have better yields because everything is getting the same. It's not like just the top nugs are getting the best light. Everything down's getting just kind of the lower par. That's not gonna, you're gonna be more larfy.
That, but I found that when we do our autos, like when you start to stress train like that or do your training, I feel like the plant just focuses its energy on a certain few, and it just does that no matter what. It doesn't yield you more in the end. It just gives you maybe better flowers, and that's just in my opinion. I guess maybe people may have different opinions.
Yeah,
but
grow it, try it, find out.
But I do think that I love low stress training because again, you do get better flowers out of it. And I don't know about yield, but if you're looking for a beautiful flower like I do, I low stress train all the time. It's my preferred method.
We're always
sure.
changing up what we're doing.
I mean, I've been liking it though.
Yeah, I do like tying over.
It definitely makes it fun. Now, how about defoliation of autos? Some people like to go in there and pluck off leaves, for whatever reason they do it, whether it be increased airflow throughout the plant or in order to get light down and into the canopy. Do you defoliate? If so, what's your method for it?
Yeah, I've kind of gone to primarily like leaf tucking, at least early on. I know some people are like gung-ho about chopping, but I don't know. I feel like I've kind of fall back to more leaf tucking as much as I can. But there's definitely certain autos that are just way more busy and way more bushy. And it's like you have to go in and start like it gets so thick, like you're going to be prone to issues. And, I always at least try and trim out the bottom portion, at least the bottom third, to get the airflow and kind of keep everything good. Trim up the bottom side branches and then just selectively, I could just kind of groom through it to make sure like what I want to be exposed is going to be exposed.
We actually just put a video out of one of our defoliation.
Freaking.
But again, like he said, I try to leaf tuck as much as possible until my leaves are covering bud sites, and then I'll just get rid of them. I know a lot of people will try, to leaf tuck as much as possible, but I just find sometimes it just ends up hindering the plant. So you gotta really just read your plant. Just, you gotta become one with your plant.
Absolutely. Let's flip it up. Let's talk about nutrients. So what nutrients, I know you said you were organic, and so what nutrient line are you using and how often are you doing feedings?
Me? Well, since I recently switched, I've been using Floraflex with cocoa, and man, I'm just following the schedule, dumping the water in, and it's going amazing. It feels like cheating. It feels like cheat growing.
It is cheating. Let's be real. The scientists have already figured it out for you. It's too easy.
It's been flawless. It's beasting out. There's one in there that, man, I'm not even gonna call it an auto because it's at day 74 and it's like barely starting to bud. So I'm probably going to run that thing over with a snowblower tomorrow.
Yeah, we're going to probably have
there's going to be a
cool office.
Slow motion. But it's just taking too long. So I'm like, yeah, forget that one.
So you liking the Floraflex?
Yeah, I think it's pretty great. Like, I'm not really opposed to organics or synthetics, but I mean, simplicity, it's easy to follow. I don't like you add it to my tap water and then the pH is perfect. Like, all I do is mix up the powder.
It's not fair.
And dump it through the cocoa. And, the big thing is just watering more with cocoa. I definitely compared to organics and what we were doing. So Heaven's been running organically. Like,
I'm running Nature's Living Soil, which is an organic mix, and I just mix that with HP, the
Pro Mix,
and I also use some worm castings, and then I add the Harvest Hero.
Little perlite to make it a little bit more airy, just because that we seem to find the autos like it with at least something in there to make it more airy, if it's a cocoa or perlite or both or whatever you want to throw in there.
So that's what I've been running, and I think I'm dialing it in pretty well. It's taken me quite a while to really figure it out, but again, I feel like I'm learning at an accelerated rate.
Yeah.
And every phenotype is different, and it's hard. It's hard with autos. I mean, it's easy, but it's hard at the same time.
Yeah, that's like one thing for people getting into autos. Like, yeah, they're fun and they're accelerated, but there's like also kind of no second chances.
Oh yeah, you gotta learn it and move.
Yeah, because the plant's gonna keep going like it wants to go. So if you're ready with nutrients or not, especially like learning with dry amendments, which take time to break down, so
you gotta be okay with just letting things go.
Yeah, like it's a learning process. Maybe that's why the Floraflex is doing so well, because it's like immediate feeding. Like, it's not waiting for this to break down. Did it break down a week later than I wanted it to when the plant needed it?
Yeah.
It's just like Floraflex. I'm just like dumping in what it looks like it needs.
I feel like as a new grower and doing it organically is so hard, because you have to understand that you need to understand the soil and not only the plant. And a lot of people don't understand that you're not only reading the plant, you're reading your soil. And this is something that I've like,
the microbes in there.
It's like I've been so resistant really to learning about my soil and more about the plant, and I feel like that's something that I need to be more aware of, and I need to advocate really more for, because I haven't been doing. And so
a relationship.
Yeah, it really is. So with organics, like I said, you're not only reading the plant, you're reading the soil, and you need to know that your soil is also healthy. And if your soil's not healthy, your plant's not going to be healthy. So those are things that need to overcome as far as like an organic grower. So.
I think that's a great way to put it. I mean, they need time to break down, right? So those worm castings that you're adding in and the Nature's Living Soil, the whatever amendments are within that, microbes need to break those down first and put them into a form that's available for the plant to uptake, right? So there's a little bit of a waiting period there. So, if you're seeing a deficiency, then you might want to move on to something that's kind of more fast acting versus like a top dress of amendments. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And I think we definitely had a learning curve of where we were learning that. Like, we were just using dry amendments and we're hitting issues, and it takes too long for what we're trying to mix in to get to the plant. Like, how do you correct all these different issues immediately with autos? Because you have to, So it's like, it's a learning curve, but it's a fun one. Like, we've never had any so awful that we just throw the whole thing away, It's like something always good at least is coming out, even though we're still learning. So it's fun to try new things and learn every time. And we've just been having a blast with it.
Yeah.
So for you said Nature's Living Soil and then worm castings. When do you typically apply the worm castings? And then also, is there any other amendments that you're adding throughout the grow?
Well, I've been doing right in the beginning of flower, which is, I would say like around week 5 or 6, I would start doing its Flower Girl, which is a top dress with Nature's Living Soil. I've started doing that, but I actually started something new where I've been amending it with the regular Nature's Living Soil first, and then the next week doing the Flower Girl, which is new, and I think it's working for me.
Yeah.
But then I just top dress it every week, and allow it to feed the plant throughout the week. Every now and again, I'll give it some molasses and some recharge just to make sure they're good. But that's probably maybe once to twice every 2 weeks. So, but other than that, we just water.
Okay, that makes sense. So that's the organic side. And then Neil, on the synthetic side with the Floraflex, are you following their feeding schedule that they have? Like, I know they have different ratios for their feeding schedule. Are you doing like a full dose with that, or what?
Yeah, so they do have a Autoflower specific schedule that you can get from Floraflex. It's basically just like half of their photo feeding schedule, like half the amounts pretty much, it looks like. So at first I thought you didn't need CalMag because I saw like a bunch of them said no CalMag like mix, but those were, I realized later, all for photos. So I did find that when I was growing the autos, I did see a little bit of spotting, like brown spots crop up, but I just started giving a little bit of CalMag and that went away immediately. And I've just been kind of tapering that off now that they're kind of heavy into flour because I feel like what's in the regular
Spoiler alert,
Floraflex,
they look amazing.
yeah, it's going ridiculous. Like I'm pretty sure it's probably going to be at least 6 ounces from just the look of it. And it's, just the very first run. I was definitely under feeding for a while. Because I wasn't sure, like, do I just start feeding the Floraflex immediately at seedling? I was like, that seems like it might be spicy. So I started it in like a Coco Loco mix. And then for probably the first 2 weeks, I just gave it water because I did give it I did like a 1 gram of Floraflex for a gallon. And then that seemed to get them a little yellow. And Heaven's like, maybe just let them go naturally because they do have, enough in them to get them. At least they're like their first little set of leaves is like just a seedling. So the Coco Loco does have some stuff. So pretty much I've just been starting them the first 2 weeks with just water. And then I'll start feeding the Floraflex at the chart, which is like 2.5. And it's been going great. So got some Mephisto started. They're beasting out. So I'm like, oh man, what are they going to look like?
And then so you're feeding all the way up, into flower. Are you stopping feeding? Like some people will stop feeding like a week or two before they harvest.
Yeah.
And then do like a flush period. Do you do any of that or what?
On the schedule, it has like a flush period for the last week. So it has the newts right up to like the week before flush, which it kind of tapers off. And then you start your week of flush and then done. But I've been kind of just like, we've grown enough autos, like I can tell their stage and like they're just entering flower. They're just doing this. So if I feel like I'm off on the schedule or the plant is showing signs of like under food or too much food, then it gives me an immediate idea of like how much I need to either dial back the Floraflex or give them a little more. So that's just what I've been doing with this first run, and it seems to be working great. Like almost zero issues, literally just water.
It's kind of not fair.
Yeah. It's going
I'm sitting
good.
here watching him do so good, and I'm like, man, I'm struggling over here.
That's why I think the organics, like in learning that way, makes you a better grower because you have a better understanding of like how to correct that stuff in the soil. Where it's like synthetics, or what at least the system I'm doing, it's like dump more of this or that, and, less, more, So it's not like I'm really learning anything about, I guess, how the plants grow or the soil and the microbes and all the relationships. It's totally different style of growing. Something I guess you think about when you start growing.
Oh yeah.
It is. Yeah, it's completely different. So many different techniques when you're talking about synthetic versus organic, for sure. I mean, we could go on and on and on about that if we really wanted to, but but we won't.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's a whole nother conversation.
But on the synthetic side of things, a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll monitor the pH. Is there a specific pH range that you typically aim for, or are you hands off when it comes to pH?
For synthetics wise, it's been pretty easy. Like, it says on the bag, like keep it between 6 and 7, I think. So it's pretty wide range. I'm just recalling, I'm not 100% sure. But basically my tap pretty much comes out at 7, almost exactly right around there. And I've been checking it all the time after I add the Floraflex and mix up my gallons that I'm going to feed. And every time after I add that, it's like right 6.3, 6.25, 6.4. So I've literally just been dumping it at what it ends up being, but it's always been like right in that range. And the plants seem to be responding amazing. Like it's the stalk of the thing is like super duper huge for,
I cannot wait
for how big it is.
I
It's
can't
crazy.
wait to chop this thing. It's gonna be, oh my gosh.
It's gonna be a fun one.
Knocked it out of the park.
And so do you also do a runoff measurement for pH, or just you only monitor the pH going in?
I only monitor the pH going in. I haven't had any issues yet to where it's like, oh man, maybe I should flush it out to clean the salt or something. Like I always like water at least till a little bit runs off every day, but not enough to like flood the bottom of the pan. Like I pretty much got it to where I water and it will drain off like just enough to where, because they're in air pots, has a slightly raised bottom, just enough to where it's not flooding it out and it's sitting in its own water pool. So I've just been watering like that and keeping them like moist. And you know, as they get bigger, you definitely have to water more. I've noticed, especially with the cocoa, because it's like the plant's so huge, it's just sucking the pot dry, and it's like, oh, got a coat. Yeah. So I'm gonna rig up an automated watering system here. I got some of the rings, and then I can just mix up like a big tub of freaking Floraflex for a week and just be like, set it and forget it.
Yeah, I cannot wait for this. It's gonna look dope.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Well, it'll be easy, which is the main. So I have more time to edit videos, and you know,
should definitely be able to save some time there for sure. Now, Heaven, on the organic side of things, pH. Do you monitor pH at all, or what do you typically do for pH?
Okay, actually, this has been a conversation we've been having a lot recently.
We're about to have a conversation.
So I've always pH'd. I've always pH'd to 6.5. Even before, like, I was having on a pH pen, I was trying to pH to 6.5. I was trying, because I always knew that it was important, but I didn't really understand why until I really started understanding, you know, the plant and how it uptakes nutrients. And a lot of people with organics will say, well, don't even worry about pH. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Well, so in this last two runs, I want to say, I hadn't been pHing, and I've actually had been running into issues near the end of flower, because I hadn't been pHing my water and I usually do it, you know, with a range between 6.3 and, you know, 6.8, and I try to get it around 6.5. And that's even when I have nutrient, or even if I'm like molasses or CalMag, I always pH my water. And these last few runs I hadn't been, and I actually was running into issues with uptake of nutrients. I feel like that's what it is, because all of my plants were showing different signs, you know, of different nutrient deficiencies in excess, and I was like, what is going? The only thing for me that would cause that is a pH imbalance, and I just obviously made that deduction. So because all my plants were just so different. So I've actually, my last run was starting to do the same thing, and I'm like, you know what, I've admittedly never checked my soil pH until this week, because I was like, I've always been told it'll just balance itself out. Well, I checked my beginning balance from my end balance, and it looks like it creeped up. It must have creeped up because I wasn't pHing. So for me, I don't know if it's so much of pHing your water, but making sure your soil pH is on. So if your soil pH is too high, then you should be pHing your water lower. So if I just feel like you should just be checking your soil pH, because it's something that I hadn't been doing, and I know, rookie mistake. But it's a real thing, and I've had to actually learn that the hard way.
I hear a lot of people saying ignore pH when it comes to organic as well, but really your water source has a lot to do with it. I mean, I fell in the same trap, ignore pH, and when I was growing organic, my water source is at 7.5 pH, so I was putting 7.5 pH water going in, and my soil pH drifted up over time, and there was a lack of nutrient uptake because the pH was so high. I know some people who had their water sources like over 8 pH. It's like,
yeah.
Mine actually fluctuates throughout the year. In the winter, it's different from the summertime in my area. So I'm not sure if that's for every area, but I feel like at least checking your pH and making sure it's in a certain range.
Yeah.
And but your soil pH is, I feel like, the most important.
Yeah, I've always had best luck, adjusting the pH of my water, making sure it's, within 6.0, 6.5 range. If it's on cocoa, I usually go 5.8, and then I'll water in. But there are things in the soil that's going to adjust the pH as well, right? The microbes can adjust the pH. The plant can release acids that can increase the TH. For example, with iron, for example, if the pH is so high, the plant will release acids to lower the pH, so then it will be able to actually intake iron. So, there are several different things in the soil.
I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah, something I learned quite recently from a scientist, actually. So
that's awesome.
Cool.
Right? That is amazing. And I mean, they got to survive. It's a survival method.
Yeah. So so there are things beyond just your water source of pH that's going to adjust the actual pH in the medium. So how about ppm or EC or other measurements that growers commonly make? Do you do it on the synthetic side of things?
Yeah, the FloraFlex schedule does have like a recommended EC for each stage too. So it gives you not only like how much you should be weighing and adding to your water per gallon, what EC it should come out to. So I have an EC meter, I have a pH meter, of course. I'm checking. I still, even though it's always been like within that 6 to 6.5 range easily, just straight mixing it right out of the tap, I still been checking the pH anyways, just because I'm still always curious if there's a drift. And the EC's always been pretty much bang on with what they suggest. So I've literally just been, I feel confident enough now with the auto watering system, like I can just do the recommended amounts with my straight tap water, and it should just basically be maintaining. Unless the one thing I haven't tested is like long terms, like mix it up, let it sit for a week. Like if I'm going to mix up a bucket for a week's worth of watering at a time, like is the pH going to drift over time in that bucket? Yeah, I'm going to measure it and figure out if it's doing that, because then I'll have to maintain basically I don't want a huge reservoir. I just want enough to get me at least like 4 or 5 days in case I'm at Heaven's House or we're like going to Chicago for Canna Fest. Like I want to make sure everything's not going to die because I didn't water it one day.
Yeah, that's a great experiment. I'm into that.
Yeah, but from what I've seen, it seems to maintain.
Heaven, do you do the monitoring of ppm or EC at all when growing organic?
Never.
No.
Never. So, I don't even think.
So it's very hands off.
I just find that if your pH is on, if the plant is healthy, it's gonna take what it needs.
Yeah, there's definitely something to less is more, especially with autos, and you're just learning. It's easy to get into that. As long as
it's there for it to take.
It's easy to get into that too much love syndrome where you're just trying to do too much at once, like with an auto. Like if you're new, just like take it easy. Like if you're using bag newts from the store and you're getting some Fox Farm, like. Just water that baby
just
for
watch her for
the first while. Like you're gonna at least get to 4 or 5 weeks on just that. Don't go crazy. It's easy to get out of control and get in there and start wanting to add stuff and do this and
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, it's definitely when you have that bag soil that's enriched with nutrients, it can be a lot easier. And then you definitely don't have to feed right away for sure. Let's switch it up. Let's talk about harvesting autos. I know there's quite a few people that struggle to identify when the plant is ready to harvest. What do you both do when it comes to harvesting autos? Like, how do you know when to harvest?
Well, we have a saying, 84 out the door. So, that's really our general timeline. We're not going to say that every plant's at 84 days you chop it like that. It's more of a guideline than an actual rule. But just like any photo. Really.
Yeah, we're looking at the trichomes. We're looking for usually around 15 to 25% amber. It just kind of depends on the plant, what we're feeling for it, how the whole plant's looking. But definitely we want to make sure the trichomes are cloudy. We've found if we chop it when they're too clear, just ends up being like you get more of a jittery effect than what we're looking for. So we just find like, at least I like a little bit cloudy with some amber, definitely. Amber. Not just on the very top buds, but like throughout the plant.
Yeah.
But we found most autos seem to take about 84.
You got to look at the trichomes.
I've spoke to somebody recently talking about autos in particular, and he brought up something I thought was very interesting. He had mentioned that with autos in particular, he found that some genetics don't really amber up. It takes extendedly long time. Bananas will shoot out prior. Have you come across that in any of the autos that you've grown where it's not turning to amber, although the plant looks like it's done?
Not really.
I don't think I've seen that either with the genetics that we've grown so far.
We've had the banana, like the nanners and stuff, but I think that was more or less,
running it too long.
Yeah, not even just running it too long. The light situation wasn't great. The humidity situation wasn't great at the time when we had experienced this. So I'm not sure if that had anything to do with it.
Or some feeding issues we could have been doing. Like stress will cause them to herm and nanner. And I've definitely probably stressed one from a pH issue from a pen that was way out of whack. And that was my own fault for not preventative and like calibrating it. But autos are susceptible to that kind of stuff, heavy stresses, because they are in that race to the finish. Like they're just trying to survive, and they're just like on a beeline to the end. So,
but as far as the flower itself, I think it's just like any photo flower. You look at it. If you look at an autoflower versus a photo flower, if you're not looking at the entire plant, I don't know if you'd be able to tell the difference.
Okay, that makes sense. I just figured I'd bring that up because I heard, like I said, I heard that from somebody else. I thought it was super interesting, so I figured I'd talk to somebody who has probably grown more autoflowers than me. I've only grown probably about 24 autoflowers total, so I don't have that much experience with autoflowers. But I hadn't heard that before.
Dang.
I've grown a lot more than that.
Can't wait to see you do them at Festos and see what you think of them, because we think they're pretty impressive.
Yeah.
This would be awesome.
It's gonna be so good.
Light cycle. What light cycle are you typically using for autos? Some people are doing 18/6, some people are doing 24, some people are doing no darkness, 24 hours on and no hours of darkness. Do you stick to one light cycle, or you've tried several, or what?
Well, Neil's tried a couple different kinds of light cycles. I've always done 18/6. It's always just kind of been a no-brainer to me because autos don't thrive. It's been proven they don't thrive in anything less than 18 hours of light. But so it was a no-brainer to me to just do that because obviously electric costs money. So
yeah.
So I just started out with that, but Neil's tried different light cycles.
Yeah, I pretty much since I started. So when like the 2x4 videos started, like early on in our channel, like that was basically the grows at my house. And I started with the 24 because I was like, oh, more light, more yields, yeah, And but honestly, after like a year of doing that and just seeing what was coming out of Heaven's tent running 18/6, and then seeing what was coming out of my tent in 24. I felt like there was no real difference. Like I didn't see any substantial difference between the yields from her plants and the yields from mine. So I'm like, well, what's 4 hours more, or whatever amount of time rest for the plants, lower electric bill. And if I was to tell somebody new, like just go 18/6, because you're going to be making mistakes. You're not going to be like so good at growing that you're maxing out this plant's genetics and potential where you could actually maybe see then a yield difference. I feel like, 18/6, unless you're really killing it or you're a really good grower, you're probably not going to notice any difference.
If you're a really good grower, then you should already know the answer to the question.
Yeah, I got to agree with you. I think there's 18/6 generally. I've tried both 24/0, 18/6, 24 light cycles, and I didn't see much of a difference except for my electricity bill, which was higher with
exactly.
So, my personal opinion, it wasn't worth it, but I'm sure there's people that are going to comment on this video and say, what, you kidding me? 24/0.
I got
24 hours.
I totally got 4 more ounces. And maybe maybe they did. Like I feel like some of these people in this deep water culture that can just make these plants go crazy, like you probably would see a better yield because you're nailing it, but like it's gonna take us years.
I feel the same way with
good.
CO2 though, by the way.
Yeah, so we're
yeah, there's so much more that we could talk about, but we're gonna kind of wrap things up here. I did want to get some just general advice from you two for the folks that are beginners growing autoflowers, right? What general advice do you have for folks that are just getting started with autos?
Just know that when you make mistakes, just treat it as a learning experience, because when you're growing autoflowers, and I'll say it forever, but you're on a timeline. So that is always something you have to consider. So when you're growing autos, just take every experience as a learning experience and move on, and just know that you can, if you can do it, I can do it. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, I'm high. If I can do it, you can do
I'm
it.
high again. I don't know. I feel like it's a crazy question, but if you're new and you're thinking about getting into it, like, you're obviously going to be leaning towards, like, you know, some certain style of growing, because basically, you know, everybody has their own way of growing, and you won't know until you grow. So just start doing something and figure it out along the way. Like, community's amazing. It's super fun. It's a fun hobby.
With anything, you got to start somewhere.
Yup. And you're pretty much always going to end up with something, you know, and it's always going to be better every time. So just go for the gold.
Good advice. So tell the listeners, how can they find you? And what do you have upcoming in the future?
We're Highigan on everything, luckily. So Instagram, YouTube here. We have the channel. So, you know, all kinds of fun auto adventures, trying all these different crazy things. We're trying to figure it out, having fun. We're going to be at CannaFest in Chicago, April 9 and 10. So if any of you guys are going to be there, say what's up. It's going to be a blast.
We're up for our Influence of the Year. Not sure exactly what that means yet, but it's very exciting.
It's going to be fun. And there's a bunch of people said they're going to be there. So we're like, heck yeah, we're going to Chicago. We're taking a train and meet a bunch of people.
But yeah, we have our lives every Sunday. Every other Sunday. And that is on YouTube and Twitch. So
we out here.
Sweet. Well, I'll definitely have a link to your channel down in the YouTube description section below. If you're listening on one of the podcast platforms, just search for them. Highigan. Search that on YouTube. You'll find them. They'll pop up. If you enjoyed this video, click that thumbs up button. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Every single weekend I'm releasing these Garden Talk podcast episodes, and I'd love for you to tune into future episodes. Neil, Heaven, thank you so much for coming on today. This has been fun. This is a real cool, laid-back conversation, and it's definitely fun to hang out with you guys. So.
Yeah, we
so
love
much.
this. We're big fans of you.
Yeah,
so
we love it.
So thanks for having us on.
Thanks so much, man.
All right, take care, everyone. See you in the next episode.